All right, I don't know, man. Just say something funny.
It doesn't happen like that.
It happens all the time.
Well, okay,
I have conversations with you. You're funny sometimes.
Once in a while.
Say something funny.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to 2M Football.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Matt, and we are heading up with the NFC this time.
Yeah.
It's so weird to say that. I'm so used to saying AFC.
Let's see how many times we make that mistake during the show today.
Well, we'll try not to, but it's the NFC West that we're going to be kicking things off with on this side of the conference.
Yeah, the West consists of the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Cardinals,
and the Rams.
The
LA Rams.
LA, yeah. It's another one. Still getting used to it. But today, we're starting with the first place team in the division, the Seahawks.
Not the 49ers?
They were close to first place, just off by about 3 spots. But the Seahawks were 10-5-1. They had a tie this year. And they won the division, made the playoffs as a wild card team, and they won in the wild card against the Lions. And then they lost to the Falcons in the divisional round.
A lot of teams lost to the Falcons.
Not the Patriots, though.
You know, let's keep going.
All right. So, yeah, another year, another NFC West victory for the Seahawks.
They're a good team. I mean, what can you say about them? They're pretty solid.
He had to do things differently this time, though, because Russell Wilson wasn't 100% healthy for the first half of the season due to various injuries. And the team couldn't rely on the running game like they usually do. The defense, though, as good as ever, despite some injuries there, too. There's not really a clear challenger to the throne right now, so to speak, and we'll get into that more as we go through this whole division.
I think the only team that has potential is the Cardinals, but like you said, we'll get to that bridge when we cross it.
Yep. So, we'll get started talking about the Seahawks offense. They scored 22 points per game this past year, which was 19th in the league. Averaged 357 yards per game, which was 12th. 258 of those were passing yards, which was 10th. But rushing, as we already mentioned, is where they struggled a bit, where they only averaged 99 rush yards per game, and that was 25th in the league.
Wow.
Pretty low, and not what you expect from these guys. Back in the days of Marshawn Lynch, Skittles himself.
Beast mode.
Beast mode, yeah. And we'll get to the running backs in just a minute.
Really quickly on Russell Wilson, though.
He played through knee and ankle injuries at the beginning of the season.
He is, for anyone who questions his toughness, I think this year has proven that it doesn't matter.
Right. He did not miss a game, even though he was hobbled. He couldn't run the way he usually does.
He had ankle, knee, and he pulled a pectoral muscle, too.
That's right, yeah.
And he still managed to throw the ball rather efficiently.
He did, as evidenced by their 10th most pass yards per game in the league this year. And he had to throw more than usual because the running game didn't work that well. He had a career-high 546 pass attempts this year. And he completed 64.7% of those for 4,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 11 picks. The touchdowns was a little bit low compared to previous years in his career. It was his second fewest touchdown passes in a single season and the most interceptions he's ever thrown in a year.
I think a lot of that is because his scramble ability was hampered.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't roll outside of the pocket as comfortably to compensate and get the ball down the field. He kind of had to be a pocket passer.
Right, and that's not something he's necessarily used to doing. And also just throwing the ball, you need your legs for that. If you're not at 100%,
got to plant your feet. You have to make sure that your form looks good.
That's where the power comes from.
So
I'm not going to blame him for that.
I think it's going to disappear next year once he's back and healthy.
Mm-hmm. He also took, and this is also a testament to the fact that he couldn't really move that well, is he took 40-plus sacks for the fourth time out of 5 seasons. He's been banged around his entire career, but it was even worse than usual this past season.
Well, that offensive line is just garbage.
It's bad.
Out of all the lines we've talked about in the league, they may have one of the worst.
They have not invested in their offensive line lately, trading away guys like Unger, the center, in the Jimmy Graham trade. They got rid of Russell Okung last year, and just their best pieces they've been shipping out, and it's something they're going to have to address. Back to Wilson, his rushing totals were way down too, again, because of the injuries mostly. He had just 259 rushing yards this year, and only a 3.6 average per rush compared to 553 yards last year and 5.4 average per rush a year ago. So he's still one of the better QBs in the league, obviously, but he relies, as the whole team does, I'd say, on a strong running game to be as effective as he can be. And so that's something that they're going to have to address this offseason.
Yeah, they don't have a choice. Otherwise, Wilson will not last another few seasons getting this beat up.
So at running back, they've got a young running back core, but all these guys have an injury history. And the main guy this past year was Thomas Rawls, he was supposed to be the main guy. He had a really great rookie season in 2015, averaging 5.6 yards per carry and 830 yards before he broke his ankle late in the season. So he returned for 2016 to be the starter, but in week 2, a fibula injury ended up sidelining him for the next 8 weeks. And when he came back in week 12, he had a couple of good games, but overall, he wasn't the same effective runner that we were used to seeing from him last year. Let's see. He ended the season with 109 carries for just 349 yards and only a 3.2 average, which is very low.
Yeah. And only 3 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not much either. And this is also probably a combination of things. I think we're going to be throwing the offensive line under the bus a lot this show. But They really struggled. But I would also say that Rawls didn't look quite like the same player from a year ago. And maybe he was still getting back into form. So we'll see what happens for 2017. He's only 23 years old, but he's already had some significant injuries. Like I mentioned, the broken ankle in 2015, the fibula injury this past year. So we'll have to see. And so the other guy who carried the ball a lot while he was injured was Christine Michael, who's not on the team anymore. So we won't spend much time talking about him. He went to the Packers, where he's now a free agent again.
Yeah, I think he's going to bounce around.
Yeah, and he already has a lot in his career.
The only other one that I saw that had potential was C.J. Prosise.
Yeah,
again,
Prosise.
Another back that looked good while he was healthy, but the problem was staying in that condition.
Yeah, Prosise did look great. He was a rookie third-round pick out of Notre Dame this past year. He played in 6 games, and he did look really great before fracturing his shoulder blade. He had 30 rushes for 172 yards. That's a 5.7 average per carry and 1 touchdown. He also looked good in the passing game, too. He had 17 catches, 208 yards. So he's a guy that I'd say could be, but he's not a primary back.
No.
He's a third down back, in my opinion. They've also got a guy there named Alex Collins, who was another draft pick this past year. He really didn't get much playing time. But the good news is all these guys are young, and they've showed some level of promise. The bad news is they've also already developed a bit of an injury history. And with free agency starting this past week, we've already heard reports that they're bringing in some veteran running backs for visits to see if they'd be a good fit with the team. The guys that I've heard about are Jamal Charles from the Chiefs formerly, Eddie Lacy of the Packers, and everyone knows Adrian Peterson. So if they get one of these guys, which I think would be a good move, that will solidify this backfield a lot.
Mm-hmm. It'll give the young guys competition and make them focus on staying healthy to earn back that starting running spot.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to wide receiver. The Seahawks have a weird wide receiver core, in my opinion. It's not typical of what you see on most teams.
Typical is what? Is Jimmy Graham's a machine and considered more of a receiver than a tight end?
Well, Jimmy Graham is great. And he is a prototypical pass-catching tight end. I'm talking about Doug Baldwin, mostly.
Oh, yes.
He's their number one receiver. Let's see. He's 28 years old. He led the team in receiving again and put up his second straight 1,000-yard receiving season. He had 94 catches, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns this past year. And I say atypical because he's like medium-sized. A lot of teams have that huge receiver to be their number one.
Like 6'5", 210 pounds.
Des Bryant, Julio Jones, Megatron back when he was a thing. And I say it's weird because the Seahawks don't have anyone like that. They have a bunch of speed guys on the roster.
This entire team is based on speed, even their defense.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And I'm sure you have more to say on that.
I got a couple things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we'll get there. So the number 2 there is Jermaine Kearse, technically number 2 on the depth chart, but I kind of disagree with that. He's been there 5 years, but he had just 41 catches for 500 yards and a touchdown this year. The guy who's more exciting to me is Tyler Lockett.
Yes.
He was a third-round pick back in 2015, and he is a big play guy, averaging 14.6 yards per catch. This past season, he had 9 catches that went for 20 or more yards and 3 that went for 40 or more. He's fast, he's dynamic, and he also handles some of the return duties for the team.
Yeah, he's also their main punt returner, and just on the special team side of the ball, he's very agile. Mm-hmm. He's hard to tackle.
Right.
And I noticed that on some of these teams that struggle with tackling, he was almost like a knife in their side the entire time.
Yeah, so he's way more exciting to me than Curse. I think Lockett should be the number 2.
I think the only reason he's not the number 2 is because he's their primary punt returner. And it just gives him a little bit of a breather before he has to go out there and start receiving passes between the punt return. You bring a punt back 70 yards, the last thing you want to do is turn around and get in the huddle.
Now sprint 50 yards again on a go route. Yeah, that makes some sense to me.
So, but I do agree that he's a much more dynamic player than Jermaine Kearse. Although Kearse does have his moments.
He's solid. Yeah, he has some moments. You're right. The other guy that's part of this receiving corps is Paul Richardson, who had some really big plays in the playoffs, but he didn't do too much during the regular season. And he's another young guy, so we'll see if he earns his way onto the field some more next year. And so, anything else on the receivers?
Other than I think that Russell Wilson's entire career is tied to the combination of Jimmy Graham and Doug Baldwin. Mm-hmm. Because when Graham was injured, Russell Wilson had a phenomenal season, but it's like he felt like he was missing something. Right. And then with Jimmy Graham back from a torn ACL that nobody thought he would recover.
Torn patellar tendon. Yeah.
Patellar tendon? Mm-hmm. All right, well,
It's close. It's in the same area.
It's in the knee. Which a lot of the commentators were mentioning that some people never recover from.
Right.
And then the insane one-handed catches he would have is like he wasn't injured. So I think it was good to see him back.
Yeah, it definitely was. He was second on the team with 65 catches for 920 yards and 6 touchdowns this past year. So he's definitely back, and it's good to see. We've already trashed the O-line a couple times.
Yeah, I've seen the weirdest thing I ever saw it did, and I'm just going to be quick, was on Week 4 versus the Jets. Mm-hmm. Now, we know the Jets' defense was supposed to be stellar, and it was subpar at best. But the weirdest thing was occasionally, when they would rush, bring in, a safety blitz off of one side, the entire O-line would twist. And I know you mentioned, when we were just chatting, that maybe it was designed that way, but it didn't look natural. It looked like the line panicked and everyone ran to one side. Yeah. And Russell Wilson looks up, and there's a tackle in front of him, and that's his only protection. It seemed like a lot of miscommunication. I think this O-line just needs to be overhauled.
It does. They should invest in it in the draft.
The rest of their team is balanced. They can afford to invest money into their offensive line. If they invest in their offensive line, this team would be unbeatable.
Right, because they have a solid receiving core, a great tight end, great quarterback, a good stable of running backs. I say that should be addressed too.
The defense is solid.
But yeah, I agree. O-line, really quick. Through free agency, they've already signed Luke Joeckel, formerly of the Jaguars, to a 1-year deal. I don't know how helpful that's going to be, though. This is a guy who started at left tackle. He wasn't really effective there, so they moved him to guard last year, the Jaguars did, and then he got hurt right away, so they didn't get to see how he performed at guard. So we'll see where the Seahawks want to put him, whether it's tackle or guard.
On the bench.
That could be where he ends up, too. But
sorry.
This whole... Yeah, there's some anger there.
Sorry, was that emotion? I'm sorry, we're not supposed to show emotion on the show.
All right. Well,
speaking of emotion,
yeah.
If you're all wrapped up on that side of the ball, let's flip to my side.
All set. Let's get to it.
Honestly, there's not much to say about the Seattle defense because it's just solid overall. There's not a lot of weaknesses. They play a unique type of soft zone, but it works for them. Their man-to-man isn't the world's best, but they play with speed and physicality, which is what they've always prided themselves on. And I've said it in a bunch of other shows, and I'll say it again probably in the rest of the shows we do. They have some of the most solid tackling that I've ever seen. In fact, it's been shown on TV, like in commercials, Pete Carroll talking about how they teach tackling because it's so important. And it sounds so basic and fundamental, but so many teams struggle with securing a tackle.
Yeah.
And this team does such a well-rounded job. The stats-wise, they were in the top 10 in everything. They were third overall in points allowed per game with 18.2, 5th in yards with 318.7, 8th against the pass with 225.8, and 7th versus the run with 92.9. So very top 10 defense, which is what you expect out of this.
Yeah.
KJ Wright at linebacker and Earl Thomas back there at safety are two of the best players on this team. Unfortunately, Earl Thomas went down with a leg injury. But despite the fact that minutes after saying he was retiring, he's not. He's coming back. And he's just going to take the offseason to relax and recover, which is what we want.
That's good news for them.
Because this defense needs him.
Yeah.
They suffered hugely up the middle against the deep ball without him. And this is going to be a high praise because I don't think I've said this yet. This team has the best rally to the football after it's thrown out of any defense in the league. When that ball hits the air, the entire defense chases it, which is something you want because if one person does miss a tackle, you don't get that huge loss of yardage from the offense.
Because there's someone else there.
Because there's another 2 or 3 people right behind it. And the game I watched all this for was Week 4 against the Jets. Oh, and I have a little side note here because I have to.
All right. This should be good.
So there was a slant route that was going in front of a defender where Brandon Marshall fell and Sherman nearly picked it off, but thankfully he didn't. So Ryan Fitzpatrick didn't have another interception there. That was on his receiver, Brandon Marshall.
Okay.
Come on now. It's like bringing it up Blake
that's
Bortles
good.
whenever I can.
All right. It's okay. It ties the shows together.
Right?
Fitzpatrick is still terrible.
The thing about their defense, and this is true for their offense, is they're very fast. They're not big guys. I mean, they're tall, especially the Legion of Boom in the backfield. They're all on average, 6'5", 6'6".
I don't think they're that tall, but 6'1" or 2 probably.
They're at least 6'3".
All right.
Mike's going to look this up right now while I continue
going.
to talk. But on special teams, though, I would say is where they struggle the most with this difference in size. So versus Buffalo, it was because Powell, and there's 2 different Powells. I forgot about this. There's Powell on the Jets and Powell on the Seahawks.
Oh, right.
But to show how they're a team's team, and what I mean by this is they play for each other as well as they play for themselves. And for instance, there was a Lockett punt return where Powell threw himself, taking out 2 defenders at once with 1 tackle. He threw himself across both of them and allowed Lockett a 35-yard punt return.
Wow.
So they work very well together. I do have a quick mention here for one of their big name players, and that's Richard Sherman. Sherman he's like we discussed with the Bengals, Vontaze Burfict. On the field, you can't argue his impact he has. He's a very dynamic player. He's very physical. Some would say very handsy. But what he's got to be careful of is his sideline and press conference antics. He gets in referees' faces. He got in Pete Carroll's face over a call Pete Carroll made.
An offensive play call, no less. So that's not even his side of the field.
The only time he's been quote-unquote offense is when he's occasionally received a punt or kickoff return, which happens once in a while. But as a coach, Pete Carroll is probably one of my favorite coaches. I don't believe he's 65 years old. He does not act like it on the sidelines. And,
he has so much energy. It's fun to watch him coach.
And I don't know how he puts up with this. Sherman's a great player, but these antics can add to problems with team continuity. You start to become a distraction, like Odell Beckham, and with the instance with Antonio Brown in that whole Facebook video.
Right.
It can lead to many problems on this team. And I think he's better than that. He's more mature than that, and he should know better. But I think he needs to watch himself, because if this keeps up, when it comes time to renew his contract, that's something that Pete Carroll is going to have a lot of influence on. When you pull him into your office for that review, what do you say? You've challenged me on the sideline numerous times. You're in referees' faces. You can't be doing that stuff. He's better than this. I really think so. And the last thing I have is one of their free agents is their defensive end, Demontre Moore, who had a meh season. He had a total of 7 tackles, a half a sack, and only played 4 games. My final vote is release him.
I'm fine with that. They got Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill already playing defensive end, and those guys are both solid starters.
And if they want to groom somebody, they can draft Reddick from the draft.
Okay.
I said the draft and the you know what I meant.
I know what you mean.
But other than that, this team just needs to keep their defense as is. There's nothing really wrong with it. It works well for this team. This team works the way they have their schemes run, both offense and defense work. I see no reason to change it.
Just one more thing for me.
Uh-oh.
I looked up the heights of all their starting defensive backs.
And I'm horribly off.
Not horribly. Okay, Richard Sherman is 6'3".
Okay.
Earl Thomas is 5'10".
No way.
Yeah, Earl Thomas
Are
is
you
5'10".
serious? He doesn't play like it.
Cam Chancellor is 6'3". Deshaun Shedd is 6'2". And Jeremy Lane is 6 foot.
Okay, so 6'3" was my number. They're at
You
least
said
6'3".
6'3" was the average.
Well, when you average those.
The average is 6'1".
You did the math too, didn't you? I hate you.
Ding.
Watch for that little Easter egg through the series. So I think you know what it's time for, Mike.
TLDW. Find a thing of people chanting that. Okay?
Yeah, I'm on that.
We have a great editor here at 2M Football. Anyway, yeah, so the Seahawks had another good year, winning the division, making the playoffs, but they lost in the divisional round to the Falcons. The offense was pretty good, but a little worse than usual this year because they struggled to run the ball. And most of this is because their porous offensive line.
Porous is being nice.
Yeah,
the non-existent.
They're bad. And they allowed Wilson to get sacked over 40 times, and he suffered a few injuries that also hampered his ability to run the offense.
Yet proved he was still this team's quarterback, despite
For sure.
playing through injuries.
Jimmy Graham is back and looks better than ever.
You couldn't even tell he was injured.
No, it's really nice to see. The one thing on offense, besides the offensive line, is I think it would be a good idea for them to bring in a free agent running back. Like we talked about with Jamal Charles has visited there, Eddie Lacy is visiting, and Adrian Peterson are all visiting. If they get one of those guys to bolster this young but injury-prone running back core they have right now, it would be a big boost for this offense.
And I think, personally, Eddie Lacy would be the best fit.
I'd like that. Yeah, he's a big physical runner. We think he has the weight issues under control, and yeah, that would be a good fit for them.
On the defensive side of the ball, really no changes need to be made. I mean, they could release Demontre Moore, and the draft is defensive heavy, so if they wanted to pick people to groom to replace anybody, now's the time to do it. They don't really need anything else. I mean, their secondary is one of the most dynamic. There's a reason they're called the Legion of Boom. Their linebacking core, KJ Wright and all of them are fantastic. One of my favorites. I just think Sherman needs to control his emotions on the sideline and control his interactions with the refs, because when it comes time for his contract to be renewed, that's something that everybody's going to look at. With that, I mean, keep everything the same. Don't if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yep, that definitely applies here.
So with that, that's the Seattle Seahawks. Thank you guys for being a part of it. We hope you enjoyed it. It's exciting to be starting a new conference, a conference we follow a lot closer than the AFC.
Yep.
We're working our way back to our home city and our home division, so stick with us through it. If you like what you heard, make sure you click the like button and also click subscribe so you can stay tuned with what's upcoming next. Our email is in the description below, so make sure you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot us a message. We'll get to it. You can check us out at our Twitter handle.
At 2M_football.
Or you won't find us. And we will see you next time.
See you guys later.